Everyone saw the massing of Russian forces along Ukraine's borders. That wasn't a secret. Ukrainians saw it, we saw it, Europeans saw it. But what we had uniquely, in addition to that, was very exquisite information about what the Russians were actually thinking and what they were planning and what they were plotting to do with those forces, as well as other things that they were going to bring to this fight. And so, in a very direct, deliberate way, I laid out the information that we had. And of course, President Zelensky asked me a number of questions about it. But as I said, took it very seriously and very stoically. Right man, right place, right time. Someone who stood up to this moment in history. I had the almost surreal experience of being asked to tell him on the margins of a summit meeting in Europe back in October that we believed it was likely that his country was going to be invaded in the months ahead. I had the intelligence information that I shared with him, and we were sitting, alone in a small room off of this summit meeting, and almost, maybe 2-3 feet apart. And I shared this with him, and he took it very stoically, very seriously. Brought in then some of his advisors so that we could discuss it with them. And I think from that moment on, certainly was seized with the very real prospect that this was coming. When Russia's objectives and Putin's objectives became crystal clear, it was never about NATO enlargement. It was never about some threat to Russia's security. It was all about Putin's vision that Ukraine should not be an independent country and should be absorbed back into Russia. When the Ukrainians went on the counteroffensive last spring and had very significant success, there was some concern that Putin might react even more irrationally. And there was language coming out of Moscow that suggested that he would look to the use of tactical nuclear weapons. So that was a concern. But what we did in that case was to not only message him very directly. I was engaged with my counterpart, Mr. Lavrov. Others were engaged with theirs. But we urged, and I think successfully, other countries that might have a little bit more influence with Russia these days, like China, but also other countries like India, to engage him directly about their absolute opposition to any use of nuclear weapons. President Biden was on a video conference with President Xi and said to him very directly, very clearly, that any Chinese military support for Russia in this conflict, or for that matter, the systematic evasion of sanctions, would be a serious problem for the relationship between the United States and China. If there were a crisis in Taiwan as a result of China's aggression in some fashion, that would have, I think, disastrous consequences for the world economy and for countries around the world. And that's a message, too, that Beijing is hearing increasingly. Take the news this week that Russia is suspending participation in the New START agreement. It's the one remaining arms control agreement that's clearly to the benefit of both countries, but also to the world. It's a profoundly irresponsible action, and one that I think the world sees as yet another negative, deeply negative step. Look, they rightly believe that one way or another, every part of Ukraine needs to be made whole. But any way or the other could be by continuing the fight on the ground. One way or another could include negotiations at some point over what remains. All of that is basically up to them.